And hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Two Back Set podcast, a college football show with me, one of your hosts, Thomas, aka Mr. Warburg, and my co-host Patrick, aka Mr. Fusion.
Greetings and salutations, football fans. It's what do we call this? Is it rivalry
This is
week?
Hate Week, baby. Let's go.
Hate. This is where all the hate flows.
Indeed, Iowa gets a few. We have 4 trophy games, which is crazy. But this is National Hate Week,
Right.
and of course, it's Iowa's least favorite. Like in terms of rivalry intensities, probably their least one to end the season. But a cool tradition nonetheless. So on tap tonight, we've got some Week 12 kind of recaps from our 2 focus teams. Obviously, I'm in Hawkeye gear. Fusion is in Texas gear. That should give you a hint who we follow individually. So we'll go over their games from the last week. More so probably on Texas than Iowa's. There's not much really left to say until the Big Ten title game, as now that's a lock. We've got some stuff, some injuries impacting the CFP. Obviously, Jordan Travis, chief among them. And then a brief update on the Jim Harbaugh and Michigan tiff with the Big Ten, as they have now stood down. And I'll probably just start there because it's the quickest thing. So right after we recorded the show, the next day, they basically came out, or might have been the Friday of the Maryland game, where they were just like, "Yeah, we're not going to fight it." That was when the coach got fired
Yep.
because the NCAA was like, "Hey, here's our evidence. You
Right.
sure you want to fight this?" So the court date didn't happen. They reached a settlement, which was really, yeah, we'll take the 3 games and not make a stink out of this. And yet the NCAA punishment will also still be coming down the line. So that was not a shock to either of us because I don't see how they could stand up in court because it was a hearing to go to trial. So number one, they'd have to get past that hearing and then have a trial. The season's done by then. And you got to go through discovery in that process. That's bonkers to try to do versus the conference and the NCAA.
I think the other big thing is that the Pete Thamel posted this. There was evidence that came out during like the days leading up to when we recorded the podcast last week, that there was evidence that was pretty much not circumstantial, but like confirming what happened and Michigan's involvement, right? Obviously, this coach was let go because of some connection to that. I think the other thing is this idea, this person, this I don't know, booster or alum, Uncle T. The jokes were just awesome.
It was
Come on,
great.
I
I
mean,
mean,
how can you
it
not
only
take
it took
party?
Reddit like 15 minutes to figure out who it
Right,
was too. That was
right,
awesome. As
right.
soon as they put that up there, everyone was like, "No, wait, it's this poster. We know him. Like, we've got
Yeah,
links
yeah.
and tons of links to crazy, wild shit he has said, defending Connor Stallions as though he knew him. Like, it
Right.
was awesome. And of course, yeah, the Uncle T comments, people, finding various different Uncle T's at all the different big name schools. It was a good time.
Right.
But it feels like the resolution on that is largely wrapped up. It's really going to
Sure.
come down to the NCAA's formal notice of allegations and then
Yeah.
Michigan's formal 90-day response, or is it 60-day?
I think it's 60.
Yeah, sorry, I work in a bank and we have a lot of 90, 60, 30-day regulations. It's a lot to remember. So it feels like the NCAA, I mean, if the conference gave him 3 games, I don't think the NCAA is going to look too kindly on it in terms of Jim Harbaugh specifically. So remains to
Yeah.
be seen, but definitely wanted to update that given the focus of last week's intro as well.
Fair. Fair. Fair.
So other than that, Fusion, let's focus on games that actually played. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with the Longhorns, man. I mean, that was a very tough game for 3.5 quarters. Put it like that. I mean, I give credit to the Iowa State defense. They went into Ames at night, and everyone. You even made jokes about, the voodoo that happens there at night.
Especially for
But
Texas. Like they've
for
had
Texas,
problems
yeah,
there.
yeah.
And it was
I think
close.
that
Iowa State missed a couple big chances.
Yeah, there were a couple of really big chances that they could have flipped the script on the game there. But I mean, here's the thing: is that I really liked what I saw out of the defense. C.J. Baxter had almost 120 yards rushing. Um, I Texas is going to be okay. The big problem I have coming out this game is like I had mentioned this in the podcast. They had to blow out Iowa State, and I'm not saying it's the end of the world for Texas, but they're hanging on the thread right now in terms of like being that fourth team in the college football playoff. We've got Ohio State, Michigan, we've got Oregon, Oregon State, and then next week with the conference title games, all that. A lot of this, the picture could change so much more over the next week or so. But the problem I have right now is that it's going to be really hard to justify a Texas team with one loss if the tables ran by Texas and Florida State being not
And the other um, variable, if Louisville runs the table, they're leapfrogging Texas right now based on who's in front of them. If they get a top 5 win, Texas doesn't have a chance for another top 5 win. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they don't have another chance to seriously impress the voters.
And it really screwed Texas by Oklahoma losing back-to-back games to Kansas and Okie State. I was talking with a friend of mine earlier tonight, and I will say this with Texas: they run the table, and that they should. And I was watching both game day and the noon kickoff crews talk about this last week, and it just really seems like no one has confidence. This was before the Jordan Travis injury. I want to state this: this was before the game when they talked about picking out, if the cards fall, there's all these teams with either one loss or undefeated who gets in, who gets in, and who gets left out. They weren't very confident at that point of Florida State, even if they were undefeated, being that fourth team. They just didn't have their confidence because it's the ACC. They've struggled at times, and then Texas has that win. But then again, LSU was a top 3 team when Florida State beat them to open the season. It's like we're punishing, and and I heard a couple people say, well, that was at the beginning of the season, just like Texas's win over Alabama. They shouldn't be punished about when that major win took place, right? We shouldn't punish them for that. That all said, though, I find it very hard for Texas at this point. I think they're not circling the drain, but I really think like it's going to be hard, especially with Bama the last 5 weeks just destroying teams, nipping at their heels. If Bama beats Georgia, shit's going to get pretty interesting. It really is.
There could be quite a bit of chaos both this week and then in Champ Week as well. Obviously this week we have the game, so one undefeated is going down. Florida State, I doubt they will lose because Florida also lost their quarterback. Graham Mertz broke his collarbone, and he'd been playing fairly okay. Not a game. He's a game manager type QB. He's not a game breaker, but Florida didn't really need him to be that, and they could have a competent enough offense. Like they kept up with Missouri. That's no fluke. And then they lose their starting quarterback. They're just not built to absorb that. So I don't think they're going to give Florida State a challenge. It really comes down to the Louisville game. And you throw in Jeff Brom against a backup QB, I'm going to lean Louisville on that one. And then, of course, if Alabama beats the SEC, presumed champ and number 1 team in Georgia, because Georgia, they're in, I think, win or lose. It's just as good as they've looked. So then it comes down to, okay, what one-loss team is going to be out? Because there's only going to be, if in that scenario, there's only one undefeated left, and that's going to be the game's winner.
Right.
And assuming they beat Iowa in the Big Ten championship game. Right? And again, that's not entirely written in stone, but it's already etched. They're getting started on that etching. But
so, well, you just blew my mind talking about, you're saying that if Bama beats Georgia next week,
because I want to say I don't see Washington beating Oregon a second time.
That's the tough thing too. But then again, they barely hung on against Oregon State,
who's a very good team,
and they're playing Oregon this week. So that could be a situation where Oregon gets upset. Now
it's entirely possible because it was in the rain. They had a couple drives, like they had a chance at the end. Oregon State did.
Right.
It didn't go their way. They had a chance. And, this time it's a real rival. It's maybe the last time they're going to play Oregon.
Right.
It's at home, right? Or is it in Eugene? Okay, so it's in Eugene, but still, road game, last time against your main, in-state rival. Crazy things can happen.
Right.
So, I'm not banking on it, but it's possible.
Right. So what we're looking at is we're priming up for 2 weeks of utter chaos because there's going to be posturing by coaches, Harbaugh included, because no matter where they stand with the punishment from the NCAA, like he's going to be positioning himself to be that if they win, they're in no matter what. If they lose, they should be in because they were hovering around top 3 all season. You just said Georgia is in regardless if they lose.
I believe
to Bama
so,
next
unless
week.
it's a massive blowout.
That blows my mind because if you're saying Georgia's in, if Bama beats Georgia next week, Bama should be in, right? And if Bama's in, Texas has to be in.
That's
That's
where
not.
that's where it comes down to
Well,
eye test. Like
see,
we were saying in the pre-show, Texas, if in that scenario, which again, we're talking how many variables deep in this equation
yeah,
in
there's
this
just so many.
scenario, but if that indeed happens, cycling in specifically on Georgia, Alabama, and then the Texas of it all,
Sure.
in that scenario, and then assuming the game's winner also beats Iowa, they're in, right?
Yep.
So that leaves one slot. Texas would need massive style points to stay ahead of Louisville and to stay ahead of the winner Washington, Oregon, assuming because at that point you're either getting an undefeated or as it currently stands a one-loss team with a top 5 victory. Both of those
Right.
teams, winner of Washington, Oregon and Louisville, Florida State, that's a top 10 win to end your season in your conference championship game. Texas is only going to play most likely Oklahoma State.
Yep.
They need
Which
to
sucks for Texas.
absolutely beat their doors off.
Right.
Like you need to
Yes.
leave Mike Gundy catatonic on the sideline,
Right. I
kind
mean,
of
that
beat the
has
brakes off him.
they have to go to Dallas and put a statement game out there. They have to be no matter even if it was. And I'll be real with you. If Oklahoma if it's a rematch in Dallas, they still have to blow the doors off of Oklahoma. Like they
Yeah, because
whoever.
Oklahoma has fallen down the rankings, and I think they're a little generous at 13 for Oklahoma myself.
I think so too. Dylan Gabriel's
That and
banged up as
LSU, I'm like,
well.
really? You're really trying to make that Jaden Daniels thing happen if you got LSU
Yeah.
at
Well,
14.
they want to justify giving him the Heisman, which they
Which
all want to give him the
you could
Heisman.
absolutely give it to him without them like ahead. Arizona, Oregon, and Iowa should all be bumped up a line. LSU should be at 17. I think everybody'd be happy with that.
I think Arizona should be above LSU and
They're
Oklahoma.
they're playing so damn good right now.
They're man, and I was talking about this earlier. Had this been next year, we would be talking about Arizona out of nowhere making the playoff
Hell
and
yeah.
could cause like they have a really good run game right now, and they could really cause problems in the playoff.
Absolutely.
The problem is that the problem is next year that football team may not be there because they can't afford it. So
Yeah, dude, like imagine if it's the 12 team next year. Look at that like
yeah,
we'll kind of get into some wider college football playoff reactions here. Number one, I want to say, go Hawks. The final and forever Big Ten West champions going to Indy, beating Illinois. Dude, number one, Phil Parker is nominated for the Broyles Award. If he doesn't win
yep,
it, melt all of the past awards down. They mean nothing if he doesn't win. Lost Jack Campbell last year, Butkus Award, easily the best linebacker. Incredible player already in the NFL when he's actually getting to play. I haven't watched much Lions of late, but earlier in the season I was watching a lot, and he was like, "Shit, this dude's a rookie, fuck." And they lost their starting defensive tackle, who was an All Big Ten talent, projected first team All Big Ten type player. You have a new outside linebacker, Nick Jackson, who has never played in your system. Cooper DeJean just went down. You're starting, a guy who hasn't played in a year at the other corner, Jamari Harris. He missed a whole year, and then he was suspended 3 games, so you had to start a freshman for 3 games. What's their yard per play right now? And they've been on the field, remember, more than any other team with a winning record. Iowa's defense has been on the field an order of magnitude more plays. What's their yard per play right now?
I'm gonna say it's
Oh, no,
2.7.
nobody's really crazy low like that. Everybody's a couple yards higher than you're thinking.
Okay, so in the fours,
That's most people are in the fours.
okay, 3.7.
It's 3.99. And you know what last year's was? I think they finished number 2 in all total defense.
What's that?
4. They got better on defense in terms of a yard per play, which is, I think, the only way you can appropriately gauge plus points per game a team like Iowa, and because they play so many more defensive snaps than most other teams that win.
Sure.
They're not winning time of possession in almost all their games.
No, without Phil Parker, that team would not be 9-2.
Exactly.
Right
And if he doesn't win
now.
the Broyles Award, what are we even doing? He's never won one, Fusion. He's been the consensus kind of everyone knows, yeah, he's the best defensive coach in the country. He's never fucking won the Broyles Award? Are you kidding me? That's absurd.
I mean, didn't Will Muschamp win one year?
Sounds
Didn't he
right. I
win
have
it?
to go through their past winners. I was focused on the defensive guys, but yeah, it's crazy if he doesn't win. But so yeah, I just wanted to get that out about Iowa, as well as potential. Is Kirk Ferentz Big Ten Coach of the Year? I don't know. People are saying. But back to college football playoff reactions, and what I was gonna to get back to our 12-team point, right?
Sure.
So you're going, so now you're adding all these teams. You're adding 7 more teams, right? So, but
Right.
realistically, everybody in the 7 through 20 range or 5 through 20 range is potential could make a 12-team playoff right now.
Right.
I think less so Notre Dame because of who they have left. And obviously, as an independent, you don't have that game, left to really give you that late season bump. And and teams that aren't in championship games have a little bit less advantage, or not, depending on win loss and how things shake out AP wise, and with the CFP. But like, imagine a team like Oregon State getting in as the 12, because the first couple teams they'd get a bye, right?
I think so.
So they'd be playing the 4,
the 4
something
probably.
like that. I have to look at the bracket again, but they're not getting the top team that first round, not
No.
right away. Imagine you're a team like, hey, you're having this great season. Maybe you're a little banged up right now because it's the end of the season. Oh, who's your first draw? You got to play Iowa's defense. I don't care that it's at home. That's fucking hard. That's a hell of an ask because Iowa always gets better as programs like Iowa, traditionally Utah over the last stretch of time, though not this year. Obviously, they don't have a quarterback. You got to play a team that gets that much better in season, and beyond Cooper DeJean has been remarkably healthy on defense. Oh, damn, that'd be scary.
I mean, when you're stacking, when just now you stacked up Iowa to Utah. Here's the thing though, is that Utah has a pretty decent offensive set of players. Iowa lost. They lost their starting quarterback. They lost their top 2
Yeah,
tight
I'm
ends.
talking specifically this year,
I
but like
know.
think traditional
Yeah.
Iowa,
Yeah.
where
Yeah. Yeah.
Iowa hovers around that 10 to 15 mark under
Sure.
much of Kirk's tenure. All of a sudden, that's a lot of low-seeded playoffs, and they could absolutely pick off a team or two.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
it's going to be so much fun with a 12 team.
Because you look at Arizona, who
And right now, Arizona, they're so fucking hot.
here's
damn.
here's the resume. They lost to number 7 Washington when they were number 7 by a touchdown. They got lost by 2 points to USC the next week, and then after that, the next couple of weeks, beat Washington State number 19, beat Oregon State number 11, beat UCLA number 19, beat Utah number 20. Like, they have been rolling off
And they
win after
rolled
win.
Utah.
Yeah, they rolled Utah, and so I mean they rolled Washington State as well. So I mean, the only one out of all those was that Colorado game, which just I don't know, that was just an ugly game altogether. But like you say, Arizona could come in there and face a team that can let's just say like a Washington.
Yeah,
let's
that
just say
struggles
Washington,
with getting stops at times.
and
At times, they're the only wrong. They're a very, very good D.
And they've been masking they've been masking a true running game all season, right? And then all of a sudden, here comes Arizona and just like goes old school football on them for 4 quarters and beats makes it a game.
And then all of a sudden they got to press, and anything can happen when you're asking a college team to do that, even with a veteran like Penix. Like,
and then here's the other factor we're also not thinking about with NILs and scholarships and stuff. Come playoff time, some of these teams may look a little different because players may be going into the draft.
Yeah.
Let's just say,
and even one step further, you've got juniors right now who could go now, but you as a coaching staff can say, hey, stick around one more year. Unless you're a first round guy, go. Stick around. We got a chance at a natty next year. Right? Because you got teams like Iowa's got a couple juniors, like Luke Lachey. He could go. Maybe he's a redshirt sophomore. He would absolutely get drafted. He doesn't have a lot of tape, but just physical skills alone, and he learned at Iowa. That dude's getting drafted. But he could absolutely, I believe he will, just because of the tape issue, come back. And that is a dangerous weapon. And you take that onto all these other teams, those borderline draft guys that would just go in the past and everyone would be like, hey, go get paid. Now it's like, hey, you can get paid and you can fill out our roster. You're deeper, you're more experienced. You can sustain injuries better as a program, even for a developmental one. And all of a sudden, that 12-team field looks way more balanced, way more filled with parity if you can keep guys on campus. That's going to be awesome if they can do that. It's right around the corner, man, and it's so close. It's so close.
We're thinking about the now, and given that we're ending this 4-team playoff with probably one of the most difficult situations.
Yeah, like we said, there's so many variables. There's so much up in the air right now.
Right.
Because
not just this week, but next week, going into next week.
Yeah, it would have been great if Alabama had stumbled one more time.
Right.
to make to like they're out. We have so few high end 2-loss teams. I mean, 1 through basically 8, and then you kind of skip 9 because Missouri has 2 losses. Like, there is an outside shot of all the dominoes falling. I don't think Louisville will, but there's a chance. But I don't think it's likely. They'll cap out at 5 if they beat Florida State, maybe probably 6. But like, there's a chance. Like, there's so many variables, 1 through 7, of if this happens, this happens, this happens, and
But
all these other things. It's wild.
you mentioned it earlier though. Louisville may end up at, like, let's just, like you said, they beat Florida State, they end up at 6 or 7. But Louisville is going to make a case that they should be in based off of their wins this season. They have
Yeah,
to, right?
they
They beat
should.
they beat number 20 Duke. They beat number 10 Notre Dame when they were ranked number 10. Like that, I mean, at this point, and then a number 3 Florida State to win the title, like the conference title. Like there's just like
Like, I will
I
say,
can
on paper, that's a better resume than Texas.
yeah, no, you're
You
you're
know,
not
like,
gonna
I think
I'm not
Texas
gonna
would be a
argue with
better
you.
team
Right.
and talent in terms of what they did on the field. The committee, it always is weird with how they work these rankings, and they first start with just kind of those ordinal, hey, this is what we think, and they tighten things up, maybe change a few things on the low end, and they still haven't changed much in the top end yet, beyond the swapping. I believe it was Florida State, Washington this year, or this week. Yeah, Washington's up in the 4 for the first time, but it's also kind of been easy for them because they haven't had to, because everyone's kind of status quoing for now in terms of the very top. So this weekend is going to cause some chaos, but it's champ week that's going to get wild.
Right.
That's going to be nuts, especially
And
if my Hawkeyes can shock the world.
And it's frustrating because those 2 back-to-back losses by Oklahoma hurt Texas.
Oh,
They
that killed
really,
that killed it.
yeah. I mean, like, had Oklahoma ran the table and both faced each other again, the Oklahoma would have been in the top 5, and that would have been a whole different thing. But it just, yeah, losing to Kansas and then to Okie State, and then Okie State just looked really bad last week.
They're so up and down.
Yeah, like it's really frustrating because Texas is doing what they need. Like for the past 3 or 4 weeks now, people like Longhorn fans in my community, like my groups, are all like, "Hey, a win's a win." I'm like, not in college football. That shit can work in college basketball and other pro football. That's not how it works in college football. Like, there's a reason why Alabama blows teams out all the time. There's a reason why Ohio State does it whenever they have an opportunity. Georgia does it. Whenever they can, they blow you out because they need to have that on the resume when the committees look at these things at the end of the year. Like, this is a perfect situation because Texas is going to be left out if they run the table because they had way too many close victories, like way too many close victories
Yeah,
against U of H, against TCU, against Kansas State. Like these weren't blowout games. Whereas Alabama's been blowing the doors off of everybody for 8 weeks straight now. Like it's
agreed.
just like, I mean, and you're not going to have an argument with me like, hey, Alabama, they could be in, but I'm going to say you're right. But if Alabama gets in, Texas has to get in my opinion, because of that. But then you create this whole issue of that's 2 spots, and then all these other teams that are going to be at the top. Like, there's just too many layers to that. But like, I wouldn't be shocked if, and I normally cheer for Michigan most years, right, to beat Ohio State. I'm cheering for Ohio State this Saturday. I really am, because
I think most of the country is,
yeah, I want Ohio State to win.
which
And
is
if they
weird.
do, yeah, right. If they do win, I think the committee is not, and the AP are not going to be favorable for Michigan. You're going to see them drop probably like to 6 or 7, man.
Yeah, they don't
Even if
want
it's,
they don't want to slot Michigan as the
no,
3 or 4. Nope.
nope, nope. And this is their justification that Michigan had a weak schedule all season, and then they lose their one big game outside of that Penn State game, which wasn't exactly a blowout victory by Michigan, right? But like their schedule's been light overall, minus two games. Yeah, you lose that game to Ohio State, they're gonna drop them down to 6 or 7, and they're gonna be like, all right, problem solved. And the committees are going to quietly be cheering for Ohio State on Saturday as well. They
Mhm.
really are, man. They really are.
It
They
makes
don't
their
want
lives
that
a lot
problem,
easier.
right? And if Georgia, situation should be for Texas, Georgia blows the doors off of Alabama next week. Ohio State wins, and then they beat Iowa next week. Washington just wins the Pac-12. I think at that point you say, okay, well, if Florida State loses to Louisville, then Texas is like, hi guys, I'm
Yeah,
here.
that's the avenue for them, and I think
That's the best
that's
avenue for
indeed
them.
not unlikely. I do
Yeah.
think Ohio State is a much more complete team than Michigan right now. Travion Henderson coming back changes that team because
Right.
they were relying on a kind of cobbled together passing attack. With McCord is a perfectly fine Big Ten quarterback, but he is not going to put the team on his back like Stroud or past Ohio State quarterbacks and just have
Sure.
those Heisman moments. He's just not a Heisman QB. And that's not even an insult. Like that number of that QBs is so incredibly small. It's hard to put into words and context because there are 131 teams. There are only in a given year, what, 4 or 5 guys that are like, yeah, they're going to have a Heisman moment with regularity, be
Yeah.
that consistent. And that's maybe generous some years, right? This is a weird year because of all the super seniors with the COVID stuff.
COVID stuff.
But
Yeah.
like that's not always going to be the case. And McCord may develop. Like Ryan Day is a very good coach. I should have looked. Is he a sophomore? Is he a freshman?
He's a sophomore. He's a
Right, so
sophomore.
he's got a couple years. He's probably not going to go to the NFL until he's got a good year, unless he has a great junior year. He'll probably end up as a backup in the NFL, which is that's a great career. Are you kidding me? You don't have to worry about injury, and you get paid millions of dollars.
Who's the kid out of Georgia last year?
Bennett,
The drunk
Stetson Bennett.
Stetson Bennett. I mean, you could kind of stack him up to Stetson Bennett at this point in terms of
Yeah,
like when
I
you
think
compare
Stetson had a little
comparatively
more.
at a
Hey, I'm gonna go just ball out moments. You know, in terms of what I have
yeah,
watched. Again, I watched more Georgia actually than I have
no,
Ohio State, and I'm a Big Ten guy.
that's fair because there were leadership moments that he showed that
And he was
Bennett did
also an older
show.
guy. Like again,
Yeah,
McCord may get there
yeah,
physically and emotionally, with his more experience and time. Last year it wasn't his team. Now it is. So
yeah.
he may get there. And it's great having the security blanket that is Marvin Harrison.
I mean, he didn't even know he was going to be the guy this at the beginning of the
Yeah,
season,
nobody
so
did. It was a
nobody
total
did,
toss up.
right? And then
So and I
yeah,
you got to trust Day to develop a good QB. He'll be much better next year with another offseason of hey, you're the dude development.
yeah,
And Travion Henderson being healthy. Best running back in the country right now. In terms
yeah.
of, hey, ball in his hands right now, pick a dude. Not career stats, season stats. That dude with the ball in his hands. That's a scary dude.
But then again, Michigan on the other side has two
Oh,
really,
absolutely.
really good running backs in
But you
Quam and
look at
Edwards.
Henderson coming back, what Ohio State has become since he's been back. That's a team that looks like they could roll anybody but maybe Georgia.
Sure. Now I'm going to say something. Watching that Maryland game, I was cheering for
Oh,
Maryland
I
throughout that
wanted
game.
it. Except for
Uh,
if not for the
the
turnovers, they had a
turnovers,
chance.
God. But here's the thing: is that Maryland did something that they did something really like to the benefit of college football. They exposed a lot about Michigan in that hey, they don't have
They
a
almost lost
great.
to Illinois last year before the game. Illinois sucked last year.
What I mean is they don't have a great receiving core.
That
Michigan.
is true. That is their one
because
offensive
because as
weakness.
as they struggled in times with the run, they did at times with the run because Maryland was able to key in. They were not going deep. They most teams would say, okay, well if you're going to bring 7 to the box, we're flinging it out, and you're going to have to play track with our receivers, and that's where the better teams always expose the lesser thans, and they couldn't do that against Maryland. So I'm like, okay, I really and Ohio State has a very good defense from the front, like from the trenches all the way to the back end. That's where I think that that Ohio State has the advantage over Michigan. I really do
Indeed.
because
I think
is
we'll
that
title
passing
this
game.
segment, we're going to talk the game,
The game.
right?
Let's do it, man.
Yeah, so that's the big game of the week. Obviously, it's 2 versus 3.
Right.
I think right now it's one of our pick'em games as well. Michigan is picked by 3. They are the home team. That's generally the points the home team gets, which means sportsbook, this is a toss-up.
Right.
Watching the teams as much as I didn't even shouldn't say as much. I've been watching more of the Big Ten West just because that's where my rooting interest lies. But just what I've seen on film and some analysis I've been watching and reading, it just really feels like Ohio State is peaked, whereas Michigan is not. They have some weaknesses on offense that I think Ohio State's defense can exploit.
Hmm.
I don't think Ohio State is that great defensively in terms of incredible play, but I believe they are tied with Iowa for yards per play.
Hmm.
So if they at number 1, I think Penn State's right up there too. So that means unless you're able to break the game on the edges, they can muck it up on defense and make you slog. Michigan is built to do that because they have a really good run game. They got a stable of backs, really good offensive line. but Ohio State has more, I think, better athletes than Penn State did, and they're not going to be able to get away with running. How many was it? 35 times in a row. They're not going to be able to get away with that against Ohio State. You're going to have to throw the ball, and if they do, like you said, the receiving core is not as great as it has been. Is
Right.
J.J. McCarthy that dude that can
Right.
go make his receivers better? Because to me, it's more Michigan's been able to do the thing that Penn State never did. And Iowa also struggles with this scheming dudes open, right? It's not the quarterback throwing them open, it's the scheme, the routes, the pick plays, and
Yep.
the dragging action and the play action, the quick game and the slants and all these things. Are they going to be able to do that and turn that on in a way they haven't had to all season against the number 2 team in the country?
Right.
I don't see it.
Here's the X factor. It's supposed to be 30 degrees and it's supposed to be snowing.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? I mean, if you're a football fan, you know what that means. It's going to be really hard to throw the ball, which means the team that can really push the line and push, on the
And
run
that
game has
I would say that favors Michigan,
right.
but
But
they get
Travion Henderson,
Henderson is playing better than anybody in the country right now, and he is fresh.
right,
He is hitting those holds hard,
right.
and he is so fucking fast.
Yeah.
Man, if he
He's
gets on the
big.
edge,
Well,
he's
he's
gone.
big, he's big and fast.
Like, I
So
believe
yeah.
was I watching Cover 3 or something? Like, dude, shades of it, college Adrian Peterson right there. Like, that is some high praise, and not entirely wrong.
I mean, that's a lot of high praise, man. You're talking about a guy who I watched carve Texas up
Dude,
for 197 yards
he
in a
was
game
so
where
good.
that was low scoring. I think combined was like 25 points total
Yeah,
points, right? And like he had 190 yards rushing that game.
yeah.
Like he was just
A
that.
true game
Uh,
breaker at running back. I don't think we've seen in a bit. Like, as like, hey, you can win the game by yourself as a running back. Christian McCaffrey did that. I still have nightmares sometimes about that Rose Bowl. Oh my
mm.
god, it was awful. But he was so good.
I will.
Henderson could be that dude now
I
that he's
will say
healthy.
this: when you look at Corum and Edwards, they do. Then, and I'm not trying to dismiss them because they are
Oh,
excellent
they're
running
excellent
backs.
running backs. They're great.
But the thing is that they do have an amazing offensive line in front of them, right? The weather is going to play a
Didn't they
factor
have
in
a couple
that
guys go
too.
down a little bit against Michigan? They're a little banged up.
Yes,
Or Maryland. They're a little
yeah,
banged up.
they're banged up on the
Didn't
offensive line
sound
right
like
now.
season enders, but
No,
you
no.
wonder, will that affect depth in the second half?
Right. So I really, I like we said, it's a draw here with the odds makers. Technically, I'm going Ohio State, man. I really am. I'm going Ohio State just because when I really look at the two, I think Ohio State has a slight advantage in overall defense. That game against Maryland opened up my eyes a lot in terms of Michigan because Maryland was basically they were daring them to throw the ball. They were like, "Hey, we're just going to keep running 8 of the box and we're going to make this a close game unless you beat us on the edges." And they weren't flinging the ball around. They just weren't.
Yeah,
And I'm not
they
I'm
just
not
don't
saying it.
they just don't have the scheme for it.
Yeah, they're not built. Their offense isn't built for that. It's not built for that.
Yeah, like I
So,
actually view this game from a little different perspective to put,
okay,
to maybe not put the final point on this, but
sure.
which of these two teams would I want Iowa to play in Indy?
You
I
want
would rather they face Michigan
I agree.
because Iowa's defense can put the lid on anybody, and if you don't have to worry about the lid, whoa, that's a scary thought. Like Penn State, yeah, 31-0. They also got gifted basically 3 possessions, right? Well, really, I think 2. It was a while ago. 2. The fumble by All, first quarter, drive killer. Penn State gets it inside their own 30, I think, right? And if they'd have been able to put points on the board, Iowa, that changes the game, right? Just that side. Oh, and then the muff punt. Hit the back of a gunner. And, oh, there's another one inside the 30, right? Here's another touchdown for you. And from there, at that point, it was 14-0. We're going to absolutely just pound you until the defense breaks, and they did in the second half. Michigan is closer to Penn State in terms of what can they do offensively that will stress your defense, which is the core of Iowa's team. Ohio State can stress you in so many ways, especially without Cooper DeJean, that Iowa just wouldn't be able to keep up. I think if all the cards broke right, Iowa would be able to play better against Michigan. And that's partly why I'm going, I don't think Michigan can win this game. I think Ohio State's going to be able to get up for this game, have that emotional intensity. And you wonder, does the kind of psychology of like hey, our team kind of threw up the white flag on the suspension stuff, does that seep in? To like, hey, it's not us against the world anymore. We're not fighting this. Does that seep in to the coaching staff, to the players? That's another X factor in this that I don't think it will affect it, but it's going to be in the conversation and in the air around the game itself. Definitely something to watch for me.
Oh yeah, I think for me the X factor is Marvin Harrison Jr.
If he can break one or two plays, that's it.
Yeah, and that would be next week, like you said. Obviously, for me, Michigan facing Iowa, that gives Iowa a chance in the game.
Not much. I'm not saying I'd pick them.
No. I'm just saying like it gives them a fighter's chance versus if it's Ohio State, Marvin Harrison Jr. That would be a prime game for him.
You don't have Cooper DeJean?
On a really good. Nope. On a really good. Now, don't get me wrong. Iowa's a very good defense, but what I mean is that and more than likely, what would be happening if this does happen next week is that Ohio State keeps pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. Eventually, Iowa gives in. Like they just break.
Yeah, it'd turn into a rout in the second half.
Yeah, I think that's what we're going to see on Saturday as well. Here is that I think that as good as that Michigan defense, let me clarify, as talented as that Michigan defense is and should be, I think Ohio State's going to keep pushing and pushing.
I think that 2021 defense was better. They don't have an Aiden Hutchinson right now.
They don't. No, that was just
that dude destroyed Iowa by himself.
Right.
And remember that game was 10-0 at halftime, and then it turned into the 10-3 or something like that. It was actually fairly close, and then it just didn't feel like it. And then the doors blew off in the second half, and they just don't have that dude on defense that's going to break the game and keep them in it by putting enough pressure on the Ohio offense.
Like I said, I feel Ohio State now, if it turns out the two running backs can go off on Ohio State and have a great day, I'm not going to be shocked by it. But I really think when I look at the two stacking them up, it really feels like this is the game where Ohio State is overall the slightly better team right now. That they're, like you said, they're peaking at this point. Okay, this is it.
And they got that edge to prove. They've lost the rivalry games to them. This is their prove it game nationally to say, hey, we deserve this number 2. We're better than them, and we're going to beat them in their house.
Yeah, and then Michigan's got the drama of coming off of that narrow escaping of Maryland, and then the coaching saga all happening all at once. I think it finally catches up to them here this week. Yeah,
I agree. All right, so let's move into our pick'em.
Yep,
we've got 5 games. Obviously, we just talked the game, which means we have 4 more to do. Before we do that, though, a little brief rundown of the leaderboard. So Fusion is in the lead at 42. He took the lead last week. I got a little greedy with some picks.
5-0, baby.
Indeed. And I went 3-2, so Fusion picked up 2 games on me. I'm at 41. Gamma is in the lead for our fan group to win the wood burning. He's at 40. Eddie's at 39, and then it's a gap to Shadow and Les at 31 and 29, respectively.
Eddie and Gamma, man, that's a dogfight, guys. Oh,
Eddie also went 5-0 last week.
Yep.
It should be a really fun week. Here is what we have on tap: 3 Friday games, 2 Saturday games. And quick note: NFL should get the fuck off of Friday. That's some bullshit.
Yeah,
get off. Dumb. Like, you are trampling your own free minor league schedule. Stop doing that. It's dumb. You're also going to give it to Amazon, who's going to inundate your fans with Black Friday ads. It's going to suck to watch.
Oh, God. I just thought about that. Like, it's going to be nonstop.
It's going to be terrible. What are you doing?
Commercial breaks nonstop.
Your product is perfect as it is. Minus the new edition of the Thursday Night Football games on Prime. The schedule's perfect. You have nailed it. It's like trying to make new Oreos. Maybe you should just stop. You've perfected the thing. Stop. Stay on. It's like when college football is like, hey, we're going to go to Friday nights every week. No, you're getting in the way of high school football. What are you doing?
We're both nerds, but we're huge sports fans. We both can say this. Thursdays are for NFL,
Hell
right?
Yeah.
Black Friday is for college football.
Absolutely.
Right? Christmas Day is NBA, right? I'm tired of these leagues trying to find ways to push out of like what works with fans. It's like, guys, we can only watch so much sports. We have to go deal with adulting. We have jobs. Like we have to go shopping. Like you're talking like you gotta cut us some slack here, guys. So when I see like the NFL, like we're gonna give y'all wall to wall football, it's like don't
And
do
you only
that.
have that
Like
many teams anyway. Like,
yeah,
just
and
keep it on Thursday.
yeah, we don't want.
Is
It's
it just
bad enough
one?
that
Is it just one NFL game on Thursday now for the
I
actual Thanksgiving Day?
I think so. I think it's the night game. Yeah,
That's
because
so
it
bad.
used
The
to be
doubleheader was the thing, man.
we used to have we were guaranteed the Lions, we were guaranteed the Cowboys playing games, right? Now everything's gone to shit on Thursday. And I'm frustrated by that because yeah, it's just it's an I get people may tell me don't be the old guy,
Yeah,
go
it's
outside,
just
touch the
Cincinnati
grass.
at Baltimore.
And
No, wait, no,
that's
that's the Thursday schedule for last week. Sorry, I'm on the wrong week.
yep.
No, there is 3 games, and then
Are there
there's the
3 games?
Friday game. Ah,
No,
yeah,
but
it's
it's that
Green Bay,
Friday
Detroit,
game.
Washington,
Okay.
Dallas, San Francisco, Seattle.
Okay, so
Seattle's first time hosting.
they added that third game a couple like years back. That's fine, okay. But Black Friday is for college football. Let them go out there. You had your day on Thursday because everybody eats, watches pro football. Cool. Fridays are for everybody to get the fuck out of the house and go watch college football, right? Like that's the thing. It's like, come on, guys. But for them to put a Friday night game, it's just that
Yeah,
does
and it's at 2
frustrate me.
o'clock. Like, what?
Yeah,
You're
well,
not even
because
doing the
then
evening matchup?
well, the evening they don't want us because it's Texas and Texas
Yeah,
Tech
but
is the
like,
night game.
it, again, going back to the adulting conversation, most
Sure.
places are not off on Friday.
Right.
People go back to work on Friday.
But if someone is off, they're more than likely shopping on Friday at that
Exactly.
time.
Like, it's just a weird thing. And the college
Yeah,
football diehards are going to watch anyway because it's a more concentrated audience in
right.
terms of the fans for their teams. But they're not expecting, they don't want to pull in the NFL numbers because
Well, there is a reason
that's
why
not realistic.
there's a reason why college football doesn't put really big like really high profile bowl games on Christmas Day because that's the NBA's like
Yeah, they don't
unofficial
want to
start
go
to the
against
season.
it.
Like it's like,
New Year's Day is their
people.
day.
Yeah,
Or used
exactly.
to be, but less
Yep.
so now. But like it's just it really irks me that the NFL did that. And thankfully it's not going to really interfere much with Iowa, Nebraska for me
Okay.
because number one, I don't really care about Miami, New York anyway. Not exactly an interesting matchup with New York falling off the wagon. But
Sure.
I mean at 2 p.m. on a Friday? What the hell are we doing, NFL? That's a weird one for me. But back to the pick'em.
Sure.
So, Iowa, Nebraska, the Heroes game,
Right.
a corporate forced rivalry game in terms of trophy, but it was going to be a rivalry game in terms of the fan bases. Our states don't like each other, right? There was a whole thing on the college football subreddit about the corn wars over the summer. One of my favorite college football subreddit spats. It was awesome. Number 16 Iowa, number 17 in the CFP takes on Nebraska in Lincoln at 11 a.m. on CBS. Glad CBS picked up that game. I'm sure they're real happy with it. I guess it's going to be a disaster. What's the line, right? Like 27.5 or something like that? It's real
No,
low. Let me go back to ESPN's book.
Nebraska's a 2.5.
Yeah, 26.5 under. It's worse than the Rutgers game.
Right.
Like that is rough. I'm gonna lean Iowa because I just don't think Nebraska's gonna be able to play that game clean. Iowa wants to prove it. Like, hey, last year was a fluke. We lost Cooper DeJean middle of the game, and the defense faltered. This year we have time to prepare without him. We're a little deeper in the defensive backfield, and Nebraska is turnover prone. Not as much as last year, but they turn the ball over a lot.
Yeah, I think he's gonna have some transfers come in next year. They're gonna be slightly better,
Yeah,
but
they're a better team than last year, especially
yeah.
under most of Frost for the year. But I think Iowa wants to end the year with a rivalry win for sure.
I guarantee. And what this is, Brian Ferenz's last regular season game.
Yep, it's his last regular season game without wearing any Hawkeye gear now because he's in the all black.
Yeah. So I think I'm picking Iowa here. I just think that when I look at the defense, I think they can really hold down Nebraska, and yeah, I'm going with the Hawkeyes here.
Okay.
As well.
Next up, we've got a game that unfortunately collides with the NFL, the ABC broadcast. Nice to see Tulane and UTSA getting the ABC national broadcast.
The Road Runners.
Dude, you remember that? So last year, just for the audience, I went down to Austin to hang with Fusion for a few days, and one of the games we watched was UTSA. That wild finish from week 1 of last year. And
UTSA. Oh,
yeah, I've
man.
watched a few games of theirs off and on, And the line is pretty tight. It's Tulane by 3.5 at home. Over and under in the 50, so it should be a really fun game. Like, they're both 7-0 in the American right now. Like, it should be a really fun game. And I'm excited for the audience nationally to get to see Tulane kind of put on a show. So I'm going to pick Tulane at home.
Okay.
I think that line's a little unfair to Tulane.
Okay. I also went with Tulane, and I think the big reason why is I think the Jeff Traylor stuff to A&M is causing a bit of a distraction with the players, with the
Yeah.
Roadrunners. He's been asked about it a few times now in the past few days, and he's not really denied it. So I think like I said, I think it's a little bit of a lack of focus by UTSA. Now, they don't get me wrong, they're a good team. That's they came up, they just showed up out of nowhere, kind of like Texas State, and became a bowl team pretty quick. But I think the Mean Green is it the Green Wave? They're the Green Waves.
The Green Wave.
Mean Green or North Texas. The Green Waves will win this game, but it's going to be a fun one. 7-0 in the conference, man. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's a great end cap to the American season.
Right.
Do they have a championship game?
I don't know, honestly.
I have to look up their conference construction. Excuse me. Whoa. Of course, our next game is Fusion's team. Potentially last time they play Texas Tech at home, 6:30 ABC. I believe the current line is 12.5 to Texas. Obviously, we're both picking Texas in this one.
In DKR, beautiful weather. It's going to be a nice night, 65 degrees.
Yeah, you're back home from Iowa.
Back home from Iowa, so none of that tomfuckery going on. I'm going to say, yeah, Texas is going to cover the 12.5 here. Now let me preface that by stating, early on, it's going to look interesting. I think Texas Tech's going to come out flinging, but Texas is just the better team overall. They're just a much better team overall. And
I do have a question for you on this note, since we did already talk about the game a bit, and that's our next pick. And we both already said it, so we have one left. Of all the teams Texas is leaving behind, so like Iowa, we have an out-of-conference rival in Iowa State. We play them every year, trophy game. It's the state's big thing. Obviously, you guys are going to be keeping Red River because Oklahoma's on the schedule. But of the teams you're losing, who's your hey, we get one non-con we could schedule every single year. Who's that team? Or is there one? Because you're also regaining A&M.
Now, have we confirmed that they're going to be in the same division?
That might not be an annual thing, but it'll be a frequently reoccurring at the worst.
Reoccurring thing, yeah. And they could potentially see each other in.
I don't know if the SEC's ever going to get. I think they should do the protected rivals thing that the Big Ten's doing. It'll create some imbalanced schedules, but who gives a shit? It's about the history.
If the SEC were smart, they would really force A&M and Texas to schedule an every year thing, because Texas Oklahoma is the big marquee matchup, but in terms of state rivalry, Texas A&M and Texas is a marquee rivalry, and that should be the Black Friday game or the Thanksgiving night game.
Yeah, if you're the SEC, you get Texas and Texas A&M every year on Black Friday or that hate week game.
Yeah, hate week game. Hey, they used to play it on Thanksgiving night, which when I was in high school and in college there, it was a Thanksgiving game where you would go and then you would go see your family, and then we would drive either right back to Austin that afternoon or to College Station to go watch the game. So I'm going to say it's going to be Texas Tech, because when I look at the Big 12 of all the teams that are left there, I think Texas Tech has had the closest rivalry within the state. I think when you think about in-state rivalry, it's Texas and A&M. That's the number one, and then a distant second is probably going to be Texas Tech. Distant second.
Fair enough. Would you want to see them Would you want to see them do a recurring series with Texas teams? Hey, every year play a Texas team.
I like that idea. I think it would be a really, really a goodwill thing by Texas. Plus, it gives the rub to most of the teams that are in the Big 12, because a lot of the marquee Texas schools are in the Big 12 now. What's left outside of A&M and Texas. So I think that would be a cool, you do a 2-year,
Yeah, do a home, switch teams, home.
Next to home. Yeah, I think that would be really cool. I don't see Texas doing it though, because of how a murderer's row the SEC schedule is going to be going forward. So I think your out of conference scheduling is going to be cream puffed. I think so.
That's, I think, the unfortunate byproduct. Unless you had a baked in one like Iowa State,
Yeah.
And thankfully, though, Apple Cup will continue for 5 more years, which is hell yeah.
You,
That's
you know,
fantastic.
I say that, but Texas did schedule home and homes with Alabama and Georgia, so
But again, that was when they were the Big 12 and
yeah,
they
yeah,
had
it's
one
true.
marquee game, which is Red River, and then everyone else is. I mean, I guess we'll tolerate you guys. You know,
And the SEC is just a
it's
tough
going to be a
conference.
nightmare. That's what
So,
worries me about Texas and Oklahoma. Like, don't get me wrong, they're very good now.
yeah,
There can only be so many top dogs.
you're right. You're right. And Auburn's just one of those teams that that could bounce back. Florida's a team that's a legacy
Yeah,
team that could bounce
everyone's
back.
got the fuck you money down there.
Yeah, I mean,
Everyone.
all it takes is the right hire at A&M, and shit's gonna get real because they have a very talented roster now. Obviously, Evan Stewart, their top wide receiver, is gonna transfer out. If he goes, my
Watch
friend
him,
Rod
yeah.
and I were talking. Like, if he goes to Texas, that's gonna be such a hateful game next year.
Oh,
When A&M faces Texas.
yeah.
To see Evan Stewart on the other side with the Longhorn gear on. But there's just so many stories that can happen there. But I would say, to answer your question now, since we've been on this tangent, it would be Texas Tech. Like, I would like to see them play Texas Tech just because there have been some great games over the years in the Big 12 with Tech and Texas. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you could get away with the round robin Texas scheduling in basketball. Just because
Yeah.
of the nature of how many games there are. I think you could even do a Texas tournament. You
That
know?
would be cool. The Lone Star Invitational. That would
Yeah,
be
something like
cool.
that. I think that'd be really cool.
I mean, Texas
Iowa
State.
used to do something like that with the Big Four Classic.
I
I
mean,
miss it.
Texas State. I mean, you have Texas State, you have UTSA now. You have schools that are like,
And
you
Houston's been
have.
really good for a long time, and
Yep.
like you
A&M's
got you
always
got
a
good
good
programs.
city. Texas State,
I think that'd be a
TCU.
hell of an event. If I'm the
Yeah,
NCAA, I'm like, hey, what's it going to take to make that happen? Because I think those we've seen many more region. Sorry to get into basketball quick, but
sure,
we've seen more regional tournaments. Like Iowa's playing in one in San Diego now that didn't exist that long ago. Like the regional tournaments are becoming a thing. I think you could keep them more hyper localized. Like a
sure,
Midwest, mayhem bracket and like a Lone Star Invitational and the West Coast, name it whatever you want to. Like I think that would be a really cool thing that could kind of get them over that hump of, man, you guys' early season slate sucks.
yeah. I mean,
And
look how much the midseason. I mean, the midseason NBA tournament has people interested in basketball right now.
exactly.
Like right now, I'm watching not just because the Rockets are a better team, but because it's like, oh, this tournament, it sounded stupid,
And it
but
got the
in the court,
players like in.
yeah, the players are like, we're in the courts are fucking awful looking,
It's
but
like
the
color rush NFL uniforms. It's like
but the
this was a
brand
bad decision.
but the overall marketing and branding of the tournament has been phenomenal. The players' responses, the fans' responses to it. So, and then the games count towards the regular season. Like the way the NBA did this was very smart. When I first heard about it, was like, eh. I agree with you. I think that early seasonal stuff in baseball and basketball in college can only help it. It can only
Agreed.
help it.
Dude,
Yeah,
imagine a mid-spring classic.
because I mean,
Remember interleague play? That was always a big thing,
yep, yep,
because of the different rules and stuff.
right,
Imagine doing that, but it's like, hey, the Twins are gonna get the Cubs and let's see, who else can we get from like the Cardinals and like the other National League regional teams. They don't often play a ton,
right.
and it's just gonna be like the Centrals will match up and have a tournament for 2 weeks, and like the divisions will match up. That'd be fucking awesome. And I want basketball to get into stuff like that. And I hope college football doesn't go away from having marquee games like the Wisconsin Alabama game, and they played LSU in neutral sites, and like Texas played Alabama. I hope
Right,
we don't see the death of that to get back to football,
right.
because those matchups create the season long narratives. We're still talking about Texas beating Alabama. Like the reverberations of those games matter, not just in the fandom, but in the actual end of season results, because it gives us a better litmus test. You only got 12 games. You need to actually go play teams, or you run into the problems like if Michigan loses, they're a tumbling. They're out if they lose this week. Like it creates issues down the road if you don't play anybody. And in a team like Iowa's case, conference schedule is out of your hands. You got to
Yeah,
go find somebody. And we have Iowa State, which is an extra Power 5 team. So it becomes an issue of who can you get and like who would want to play you, because Iowa's a team you might not want to early season. So, it It's an interesting problem for college football to try to solve, but I hope individual teams take it on themselves to go get good games in the early season. So,
That's fair.
all right. Last game. Sorry for the
Last
tangent.
game.
UNC takes on their in-state rival, NC State. The line right now, let me flip over to college football scoreboard. 7 p.m. It's an ACC network game. North Carolina goes to number 22, NC State. UNC is getting 2.5. NC State has the better record in terms of in conference. So the road team's getting 2.5 points. I do think North Carolina is a better overall team than NC State, and they have the better quarterback.
Much better quarterback.
So that's why I'm leaning UNC.
Going with UNC as well, man. And that the main reason why is you have Mac Brown, you have Drake May, you have what's his name, Hampton, the running back, 15 touchdowns this season. I think that as much as UNC has struggled at times, I think that they're the better team. I went through the Wolfpack schedule, and I don't really see like bangers in this schedule to warrant them being 22. But at least it's
at some point somebody's got to be between 20 and 25.
I was like, at least there's a ranked opponent, ranked team in this game. So yeah, I'm going with the Tar Heels too, man. I really, I know at this point I think we're matched up, right?
I have a coin flip game of here. I might change this to NC State.
Okay, that's fair.
Because I need to make up a point.
You do need to make up a point. I really think that Drake May's ankle is starting to feel a lot better.
Yeah, I don't feel good about picking NC State though. So I think I'm going to stick with UNC. I may end up changing the Tulane one.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, just because I need that point before we get to Champ Week. And I think we'll probably call the Pick'em leaderboard next week because there's only so many games for so long after Champ Week because of the weird bowl structures. So
this is the week for Chris and Eddie to really.
It's the penultimate week, gentlemen.
And then the overall bragging right of the pool is, but next week could be a very interesting. I mean, we're gonna have to create a very tough slate of games next week.
Oh yeah,
not just.
I mean, Georgia, Alabama, Big Ten title game, Pac-12 championship game, Louisville, Florida State. I mean, you talk about some bangers. Less so the Big Ten one, but because I'm covering Iowa. And then, I mean, what else is there? You think? Obviously, we're gonna have some smaller conference championships that you want to spotlight because they're gonna be good games too. So we got some stuff to talk about next week.
I mean, it could be Tulane again in the AAC.
It might be.
SMU. It might be Tulane SMU. And that'd
be a game. Ooh, that'd be a fun game.
But and if that were to happen, if you flip, well, you pick Tulane as well. So okay.
So far.
Yeah. Okay, so far, but that could be a flipping game. Now, yeah, man. I mean, next week could be a really fun game, fun week of deciding the overall. But that's where I stand, man. I think, for me, Iowa, Tulane, Texas, Ohio State, North Carolina. So yeah, 3 road teams this week I think are going to win.
Dude, imagine if Oregon loses and Arizona wins.
I mean,
you talk about chaos.
I mean, if Oregon State were to win, Arizona's going to have a case to be in the Pac-12 title game.
If they win, they're in. If Oregon loses and Arizona wins and in.
Okay, I didn't.
Yeah, they need the help.
The breakdown,
but they would win and in if Oregon loses.
Okay.
Yeah, they have they don't have a head-to-head tiebreaker, but they have I think it's one of their tiebreakers falls to like opponent record or something like that. I can't remember what their tiebreakers are. It's not as crazy as the Big 12.
Right.
But they would have, I believe the tiebreaker would go to Arizona.
Yeah, the tiebreaker for the Big 12 for Oklahoma and Oklahoma State's a little weird. I can't remember it. I don't want to pull it
Iowa State's still alive.
Yep.
Somehow
they are.
Like, it's a weird year, man. All right, but speaking of it being weird, we should probably get out of here. It's been about 58 minutes. I'll make the timestamps quick before I actually upload the episode. So stay tuned for our Hate Week reaction next week. It'll be generally more closer to our general Wednesday time because we can have an actual regular week. This week with the holiday, we went a night early on CFP reaction night. So stay tuned. Drop the like, hit the subscribe, help that algorithm. Let us know what your thoughts are on Hate Week. Let us know what your picks for the week are and anything you think we should have talked about this week. And we'll see you for week 14/Champ Week.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Indeed. Eat all the pie.